just because you're listening to this podcast doesn't mean you need to sit on the couch. You could, technology is pretty unbelievable, right? Grab your phone, throw some earphones in, and go outside. Hopefully the weather is terrible, because bad weather just makes you feel more alive, and listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Spartan Up Podcast with Joe De Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Race.
We are talking about overcoming obstacles. The same way we teach people to get over obstacles on the course, we will teach you here on the Spartan Up Podcast to get over obstacles in your mind.
Hey Spartans, today Joe's here on a solo episode because he's got a really important post-pandemic message for you. And we're going to tie that message into a whole bunch of classic lessons that we've learned building the Spartan Up podcast. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Gone Rogue high-protein chips. Visit Amazon or GoneRogueSnacks.com and use the promo code Spartan25 to get 25% off.
Yeah, so listen, it's been a while. Welcome to Spartan Up. Joe De Sena, CEO and founder. And I thought it'd be a good time to just take a moment, take a breath. We've been doing this podcast, God, it feels like forever, literally 40 years. I don't know how many we've done in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts. We've interviewed all kinds of people. I've gained so much knowledge that I just wanted to take a pause and say, why did we even do this? Why do we do it? And for me, it's just about becoming better, a better version of myself. They say you're an average of your 5 best friends. Stuff I'm telling you right now, for all I know, I picked up along the way from the podcasts, even though it feels like this is me. You surround yourself with smart people, right? One of my guests mentioned everybody needs a personal board of directors. You surround yourself with these great people, and they lift you up, kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats. You surround yourself. By the way, science shows this. That's why we do the podcast, right? I want to dive in and say, this is not just crazy Joe, because my wife thinks I'm crazy, my kids think I'm crazy, my neighbors think I'm right. Why would you have to crawl under barbed wire? I don't understand. Why do you have to do hard things? They had it all wrong. No pain, no gain, Joe. You're a crackpot. But when you meet scientists, doctors, lawyers, business people, and they're telling you the same thing, authors, other podcast hosts, I realize that it may be outside the norm. This might be a tiny segment of the global population that thinks this way. And by the way, it's a luxury to think this way, because if you're in a part of the world where you're suffering every day, you've got very little resources, then what are we talking about, right? Then those people actually need a couch and Netflix and vaccines. But for those of us that are privileged and have everything at our fingertips, the pendulum has swung too far. But don't just listen to me. Listen to the experts, and that's what this podcast is all about. It's about diving in and showing the science. One of my favorite studies, I'm gonna botch this one. It came out of one of our podcasts. Was this study they did on rats? They throw rats in water, and they let them swim until a point where they're going to drown. And just before they drown, they take the rats out. So they took these 2 groups of rats, right? They took one group, threw them in the water, and they let them fend for themselves. Swim until you die. They took another group of rats and they said, look, we're going to rescue you just at the moment you're about to die. And then the next day we're going to throw you back in the water. And guess what happened? Those rats lasted 24 hours versus 15 minutes, because in their minds, it was oh, we're going to get rescued. We have hope. This is fine. We have faith. And that's why we do the crazy stuff we do. We stretch people. Came from another podcast. We stretch the rubber band of a person just to the point where it's about to break, and then we retreat, and you rebuild yourself, and you realize, oh my God, I got a lot more in me than I thought I did, and you go a little further, or maybe you learn something. The other great thing, I'm sorry, I'm just riffing here, the other great thing I learned on a podcast was there's people that actually live life, that experience the things we're talking about. They jump in the water, and they see how long they can last swimming, and then there's others that read about it, and they listen to podcasts, right? And they talk about it at cocktail parties. And what we're trying to do here is get you to actually live it. Yes, we do the podcast, we write the books, we talk about things, we write about them, but all in an effort to actually get you to do it. We're not big. I'm not big on this idea that just living life passively is okay. You gotta jump in head first. So right now we have Camp Spartan going on the farm in Vermont. I call it the Spartan Kids Death Camp. I'm sure I'm not using the right terminology. There'll be a bunch of protests and uprisings about that. But the kids, we had them in ice cold water early a.m. and they were reciting A Man in the Arena.
It is not the critic who counts.
It is not the critic who counts.
Not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles.
So if you really want to dive into this idea of living life passively versus actually immersing yourself in life, that's a great speech to read to really understand. Another great book, we have not had this author on the podcast, but we will get him, is Chopwood, Carry Water. And last night driving up here to the camp, I had the opportunity to listen to the audiobook with the kids, and oh my God, it's everything we've talked about for 21 years wrapped up into one simple book. A lot of Japanese stories and examples, and some of the things they talk about in the book really got me excited. And one of them in particular was this idea that you have to enjoy the process, right? It's not about the goal. And here was the sentence that clinched it for me. This idea that if you've got one eye on the goal, like I can't wait to make my $1 billion, or I can't wait to make it to the podium and get first place in that sport, whatever it is, that means you only have one eye on the process to get there. And if you've got both eyes and both feet and hands and you're fully immersed in the process, whether it's a week, a month, 10 years, you're more likely to get to where you're going. Plus, if you've got one eye on that podium, you become defined typically by that. And so whether you get there or not, afterwards, you're trying to rediscover yourself. You don't know who you are because you've defined everything around that moment. And if you don't get there, a lot of us don't ever get onto that podium, then what? Do you consider yourself a failure? So the reverse is, if you enjoy the process and you immerse yourself in the process and you realize that this is a moment every day where I can become better, a better version of myself, well, then that's how you define yourself, and you start to really look at all those difficult moments during the day, each day, as growth opportunities. Funny enough, the ancient Spartans, when we interviewed one of the most prominent professors at Cambridge University about the ancient Spartans, they specifically said, and they didn't say much, right? They chose their words very carefully, they didn't write down much, but they specifically said, don't focus on legacy. Don't focus on that podium. Don't focus on that big monument. Focus on the here and now. Do a great job in what you do every single day, and the rest will take care of itself. So, very long-winded way of saying, I love this podcast. This is why we do it. It's not to have you live life passively, but it's hopefully to give you a kick in the ass and get you outside, running, sweating, rain, cold. It doesn't matter, but just getting out there and doing what your body and mind were designed to do, which is live like an animal, because we're animals. We sometimes forget that, dressed up in our fancy clothes and shoes and going to our fancy parties. We were just talking about this idea that what the just happened over the last 14 months with this pandemic. I was reading an article. I don't know if it was in the New Yorker or the Atlantic, but basically there was a couple of smart people sitting around for George Bush, and he was demanding a plan. He was demanding a plan that should we have some sort of biological attack, what would the response be? And these geniuses sitting around came up with this idea, well, we'll just lock everybody in the house. And that idea took hold. So much so that the entire country just locked themselves. You were part of it. It didn't get past anybody. Maybe a few people in Florida and Myrtle Beach, but other than that, the entire world was locked down. And we are creatures of habit. So now I'm in the business of social undistancing. I'm fighting people with crowbars and grenades to get them off the friggin' couch, to get them away from Netflix, off Zoom, back to the office, back to some semblance of a normal life. And so if you're out there listening and you're finding yourself in this rut, check this out. There's nothing wrong with you. Our brains are designed to follow these habits, these things we do every single day. So if for 14 months you did the same thing every day in your house, it's no wonder you can't break that habit. Just like folks that smoke cigarettes or eat lots of sugar or whatever it is they're hooked on, they can't stop. You can't stop living in a lockdown. And so how do you do it?
We'll be right back, but I want to talk to you a little bit about Gone Rogue chips. These are not your ordinary chips. They have less than 2 carbs per ounce. They're made for people like you. They're made from real, fresh chicken, never from frozen, and it's baked to a crunch and seasoned with spices. They have flavors like chicken bacon, barbecue chicken, buffalo-style chicken, teriyaki chicken, and the flavors don't come from bottled smoke flavor. The chicken is smoked in a smokehouse with a blend of hickory hardwoods for an authentic smoky taste. So the Gone Rogue chips, they're light, they're fast, they're great for before or after your workout. They're easy, they're super portable. It's an easy way to get your fix with a crunch of a chip and the protein of a jerky. Visit Amazon or GoneRogueSnacks.com and use the promo code Spartan25 to get 25% off.
Well, it's going to sound really simplistic. I apologize in advance, but you put your fucking shoes on and you go outside. And then you go a little further the next day. I am fighting with the people that work at our headquarters to get into the office. And everybody's got an excuse. I get it. I want to be with my kids at their sporting events as well. And the trains aren't running the same times they used to. And I don't know what to do with my mom who lives in the house. I get it. But guess what? We had that all figured out before the pandemic. So dust off. Stop with the excuses. Our brains are just excuse machines. And get going again. Not for me, but for you. Because another thing I learned on this podcast with Dr. Huberman, you check him out at Stanford, is that your brain actually deteriorates when you do the same thing over and over. And unless you really work that muscle and shake things up and go out and try to learn French or Portuguese or whatever it is, or go run in the cold or take a cold shower or do a Spartan race, hopefully, for my sake. But if it's not that, it's something that is really, really tough every single day to get all those neural pathways opened up and get that brain working the way it's supposed to. Because just like you develop your bicep, right? Just like you develop other muscles, just like you develop cardio, you got to work the brain. And the way you work the brain, you got to shake things up. So get the out of the house. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think Huberman recommended Lisa Feldman. And I think she's at Harvard, if I remember correctly. She was on the podcast, and she was emphatic, by the way. And it's not like I find people or we find people that run 100 miles every day. These are folks just like any of us. And she's saying the science says you have to shake things up. You got to get outside. You got to go meet new people. You got to speak different language. You got to do the cold shower. You got to do all those things. If you don't, your brain shrinks. And if you want your brain to shrink, that's fine. But I don't think you'll be happy once it's shrunk. The other thing is, guys, just because you're listening to this podcast doesn't mean you need to sit on the couch. Technology is pretty unbelievable, right? Grab your phone, throw some earphones in, and go outside. Hopefully the weather is terrible, because bad weather just makes you feel more alive. And listen to the podcast. We had a woman. I don't recall her name. She was Russian. She's a mountain climber. She worked at Goldman Sachs. She came to the farm. I remember it like yesterday. And she said, I just climbed the 7 summits. And guess what I did while I climbed the 7 summits the whole time? I listened to Spartan Up. Now, that's going to sound like a commercial. I kid you not. And when she got back and she set the record for the 7 summits, she said, I got to come to the farm and I got to meet you guys. And we put her on the podcast. But there's another great insight she gave me, which was we learn helplessness. That's what we do, right? When our parents and our friends, and they coddle us and they protect us and they put security nets under us. We've got Google Maps. We don't even have to read a map anymore. We used to have to get a quarter and find a payphone and put it. We don't have to do that anymore. So we literally learn more and more helplessness on a daily basis. So, I remember. Her name was Masha Gordon. She was awesome. Check her out. Listen, one last thing, guys. Again, our brains are excuse machines. So I know you're going to find, there's another, you just reminded me of another podcast, Indistractable. Nir Eyal, Indistractable guy, taught us the most important, or the thing that motivates us most as human beings is the avoidance of discomfort. So of course our brains are excuse machines. They're going to come up with excuses. Oh, I can't do the workout this morning. I got to go make coffee. I can't do the workout. I got to do homework, whatever it is. And you have to be smart enough, because of the podcasts and the books you read, etc. You got to be smart enough to know that that's what your brain is doing, and make a left instead of a right. Get outside of that cycle, break that cycle, stop with the excuses, and go do some shit. So anyway, I'm out of here. I've got another 9 days of pushing these kids from 8 years old to 17 years old through the hardest camp I'm sure anybody here listening would ever do if you'd even show up. By the way, many adults have shown up and quit within 3-4 hours. And so I got to finish the camp, make sure everybody survives, and they're stronger for it. So I'll catch you later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Spartan Up Podcast. Spartan Up is your partner in resilience for mind, body, and spirit. We're here 3 days every week. Tuesdays, you can find Joe De Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan, interviewing biohackers, business leaders, authors, and athletes. Thursdays and Saturdays, catch episodes from our DECA, Endurance, Trail, Combat, and La Ruta series. Do you know someone who needs a little nudge? Maybe they could use some motivation, tactics to be stronger, healthier, happier, more successful. Tell them about our show. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. We want to know who's watching and who's listening. Thanks. See you next time. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Gone Rogue high-protein chips. Visit Amazon or GoneRogueSnacks.com and use the promo code Spartan25 to get 25% off.